The widow Douglas, she took me for her son, and allowed she would civilize me. But I didn't care for those rules, 'cause all I wanted was to be free and live by my own ways. Miss Watson here, she kept pecking at me, and it got tiresome, real tiresome, and very lonesome. I felt so lonesome, I must wish I was dead.
Don't put your feet up there, Huckleberry. And don't scrunch up like that, Huckleberry. Sit up straight.
And pretty soon, she would say,
Don't gap and stretch like that, Huckleberry. Why don't you try to behave?
this way of life was as far away as freedom could be. And although I liked the old ways best, I was getting so I liked the new ones too. A little bit. The widow said I was coming along slow but surely, and doing very satisfactory. She said she weren't too ashamed of me, and that felt real good. Now the problem here I was having was whether this way of living was best for me, or should I stay being uncivilized and have my own set of rules? Me and Jim here dished these robbers from their own ship without them knowing a thing about it. But now was the first time that I'd begun to worry about the men. I reckon I hadn't had time to before. I begun to think about how dreadful it was, even for the murderers, to be in such a fix. I says to myself, there ain't no telling, but I might come to be a murderer myself yet, and then how would I like it? I needed to get the murderers some help, for I didn't want to be known as a murderer. But also, why should I help them when they killed a man? Do they even deserve my help? I just now realizing Jim gonna be almost free. And who was to blame for it? Why, me. I couldn't get it out of my conscience. No how nor way. It got to troubling me so I couldn't rest. I couldn't stay in one place. It hadn't ever come home to me before, what this thing was that I was doing. But now it did, and it stayed with me and scorched me more and more. I tried to make out to myself that I weren't to blame, because I didn't run Jim off from his rightful owner. But it weren't no use. Conscience up, it says every time. But you know he was running for his freedom. But then I got to thinking about it. And what did that poor old woman, Miss Watson, do to you, that you could treat her so mean? Why, she tried to learn you your book. She tried to learn you your manners. She tried to be good to you every way she knowed how. That's what she's done. I got to feeling so mean and so miserable, I most wished I was dead. So I decided to go off and tell on Jim. But right when I was going to leave, he said, pretty soon, I'll be shouting for joy. And I'll say, it's all on account of Hook. I'm free man. And I couldn't have ever been free if it hadn't been for Hook. Hook done it. Jim won't ever forget you, Hook. You was the best friend Jim's ever had. And you was the only friend old Jim's got now. After he said that, well, I just felt sick. But I says, I got to do it. I can't get out of it. I approached the men and began to talk, but with no truth. I couldn't let the words I was trying to say out, so I just decided to make up a story of a man on my raft with smallpox, and the other men went on their way fearing the disease. I knowed very well I had done wrong, and I see it weren't no use for me to try to learn to do right, since a body that don't get started right when he's little ain't got no show. When the pinch comes, there ain't nothing to back him up and keep him to his work, and so he gets beat. Then I thought a minute and says to myself, hold on, suppose you've done the right thing, and give Jim up. Would you feel better than you do now? No, says I'd feel bad. I'd feel just the same way I do now. Well then, says I, what's the use you learn to do right when it's troublesome to do right and ain't no trouble to do wrong? And the wages is just the same. I was stuck. I could have answered that. So I reckoned I wouldn't bother no more about it. But after this, always do whatever comes handiest at that time. Life really is just one big hike up an old mountain. You see, the journey we will make up that mountain is not just one straight line path, with no obstacles in the way. Rather, it's a journey of overcoming your deepest conflicts within yourself. Not everyone has it in them to keep hiking up these mountains, because all they can think about is the process of having to walk back down, instead of striving to reach the next summit of a more difficult journey. You see, these here summits, or in my eyes, the overcoming of one's internal conflict, is a representation of the moral growth of an individual, and they serve as the building blocks for one's personal development. Our society has overcome so much adversity because of people who are constantly looking to start that new journey and reach that next summit to resolve their most conflicted internal divides. So look at me, Huck Finn, as an example of striving for that next biggest mountain in order to make an impact and change history forever. Thank you.